In today's video, I'm going to be running you guys through every step of my process on how I've been making these handmade leather putter covers. Something to keep in mind as you watch this video is no, I am not an expert. I don't claim to be an expert. Everything I'm showing you guys is just my process and how I do things. If you have any better ideas or techniques, implement those in your own projects, but please drop those in the comments as well so we can all learn and grow from them. I'm excited to finally share this video with you guys. This is something that I've honestly been working on behind the scenes for most of this year. Earlier in the year, my buddy brought up the idea of making a leather putter cover, and I thought that was really cool because I love to golf and I love leather work. So what better way to bring those two worlds together than to make a custom putter cover? And so this is the very first one that I ever made. It was a rough draft. It was kind of just, a fun little side project. And I obviously didn't come up with the idea of a putter cover or the concept of it. And I've actually seen one or two of these before, but I haven't seen a lot of these. So I came up with this template for this one, and I've kind of branched off of that and tweaked it and came up with what I do have now as this template. And this is going to be the one that I'm making in this video and show you guys. And so I'm not going to sit here and say it's a perfect idea or a perfect design, but I have been using this one all year long. So I know that it does work. So I'm confident in that. I get out and golf once, sometimes twice a week. So this one has been heavily used. It's been put through the ringer, I can promise you that. And it still works. It's holding up just fine. And so I'm confident in the pattern that I do have now. It does at least work. Like I said, I'm not going to sit here and preach to you guys and say that it is perfect, but it does work. So this head cover is obviously designed for a blade style putter, which is just what I primarily use, so that's where I ended up on this project. I know mallet putters are really popular. I just haven't quite dialed in the mallet putter head cover just yet. I do intend on doing that, so keep an eye out for that in the future. But just know that this is a blade style putter cover. It's not going to work with mallets or some of the other types of putters that are out on the market. But with that being said, I actually have went ahead and created a digital downloadable pattern pack for this. I'm not going to preach to you that you have to have that, go buy it. You can do whatever you want, come up with your own ideas. I highly encourage that. But if you are interested in the template that I have and that I use, I do have it available on my website. And what is included with that pattern pack is not only the template itself, but I also went ahead and sat down and drew out about 6 or 7 tooling designs that would be included with that. And this is one of those tooling designs. They're not all floral designs like this. Some of them are similar and they have spaces where you could include initials, a brand, or something like that. But so just keep that in mind. If you're interested in that, it's there. You don't have to buy it, but it is there. But keep in mind, it's not a one-size-fits-all pattern. Yes, it's made for a standard blade. Some of them are longer, some of them are shorter. They also have those double wide versions of these, and I'm not going to sit here and say this will work out perfect for those. However, I do think it is a good base pattern to work off of. I don't think it would be too hard to scale up or down if you needed to do that. Before we get too deep into the video, if some of you guys do decide to use my template and you intend on buying that pattern pack from my website, there are some important things that I need to talk to you about first. One, please keep in mind that it is a digital download pattern pack. I won't be sending out physical copies of that. So kind of like the belt patterns I have on my website, as soon as you place that order, you need to make sure that you add a good email address on the order, because whatever email address is on that order, as soon as you click place order, my website is immediately going to send an email to that email address with a link to access those patterns where you can then download them to your computer, print them off, and use them at will. So if you don't add an email address to that order, I will then have to manually send those patterns to you, and it's going to delay the process. So please make sure, if you do decide to purchase these patterns, add a good email address to that order. Another thing to keep in mind is I have it set up to where you have unlimited access to those patterns or unlimited downloads. So it's not something that you have to continuously purchase over time or make multiple purchases of. As long as you can find that email with the link to access those patterns, you can download them and use them as much as you want. The really big important thing here is I was unable to create this pattern on standard size 8.5 by 11 inch paper. However, thanks to my cousin's help, we were able to fit it on 8.5 by 14 inch paper, which is just a little bit longer and considered a legal size document. From my understanding, most standard printers do have the capabilities to print on 8.5 by 14 inch paper. The only thing is you might have to tweak with the printer when you go to load the paper in it. They're all different, but you might have to tweak with it when you're loading the paper a little bit, and you'll also have to change the settings on the computer when you go to print that document to let the printer know that you're going to be printing on 8.5 by 14 inch paper. And I do have all of this listed in the description of the product, so feel free to read that and reference that, or this video if you'd like. But just know, if you want the full benefit of the patterns, you're going to need to print it on 8.5 by 14 inch paper. You can still print it off on 8.5 by 11 inch paper. The only issue is some of the corners are going to be cut off. So you're not going to get that full template, and you're not going to get those full tooling designs. You can still do that and pencil it in if you want. That's completely fine. Just know if you want the full benefit of the patterns, you need to print them off on 8.5 by 14 inch paper. And I do apologize if that's too big of an inconvenience for some of you guys to figure out. That was just the best way that we could figure out how to fit that pattern and all those templates on a single document and still provide it as a digital pattern to you guys, to where you can download it as much as you want and have access to it whenever you want and not have to worry about me sending out physical copies to you. As you watch the video, another thing to keep in mind is this is Hermann Oak full grain vegetable tanned leather. So if you were going to make something like this out of some softer material or a softer leather like some chrome tan for example, you'd probably go about it a little bit differently, but because of the properties of vegetable tanned leather, when we dive into the video, I'll explain to you a little bit more about why I designed it the way I did and why I assemble it the way that I do. And for this particular cover, I used a 5/6 ounce weight of leather. I feel like that's a good weight, especially if you're going to be tooling designs on it like this, because it's heavy enough to comfortably tool designs on, but it's not too heavy, and it's still a little bit on the lighter side. If you're going to be making one of these just plain, out of some plain natural veg tan leather, or maybe some English bridal leather, you could probably go down to some 4/5 or even 3/4 ounce to keep it a little bit on the lighter side and a little bit softer. But I wouldn't recommend going above a 6/7 ounce because you don't want this thing to get too heavy or too stiff. I feel like a 5/6 ounce is a good weight, especially if you're going to be tooling designs on it like this. And a lot of you guys know that I personally usually just freehand my designs directly onto the leather with a pencil before I do any of the carving and tooling. But if you do decide to purchase the pattern pack I mentioned and use some of the patterns that I drew out, I am going to show you how I would personally go about transferring those patterns onto the leather, because if you use that method, then you will actually be able to adjust these patterns or change them up if you would like. You're not just going to be fully restricted to my drawing, so I just wanted to throw that in there as well. So I won't hold you up much longer. This is just, it's a really cool and unique project that I'm excited to finally share with you guys. It doesn't take a lot of time, it doesn't take a lot of leather, and it doesn't even take machinery. You could definitely hand stitch this. All of this lacing is done by hand, so if you decide to make it, I hope you enjoy it. But without further ado, let's just jump into the video. Don't do what I did. Slow down and take your time. I wasn't paying attention. Everything was going great, and then boom, backgrounded this area, backgrounded this area. This is supposed to be a flower sitting behind this vine work, and this is supposed to be the bottom part of the flower. But now it's background. It's okay. It happens. I wish I didn't do it, but learn from my mistakes. I'm just tooling this cover out for fun for the video anyways. It's not going to go anywhere other than my shop, maybe on my wall. So that's a bummer, but it happens. If you do use this particular tooling pattern, there's a little bit of space right here for a small maker stamp if you do have one. Since I'm just making this one for fun, I'm going to throw my maker stamp right here. This area is kind of designated for initials, a brand, something of that sorts, but since this one's just for fun and for the video, I'm going to place my logo stamp right there. I'm going to go ahead and add a two-tone look to this putter cover. So all of this bordering, I am going to dye dark brown and dye these backgrounds dark brown, and then leave this floral tooling natural colored. I generally use a stitch groover and groove a stitch line in my projects before I stitch. And if I'm going to do any dye work, I like to do that stitch groove before I dye, just so if I go back later on over that dye with a stitch groove, it doesn't leave a lighter color that's going to show up in between my threads. It's just personal preference. But something to keep in mind if you do use a stitch groover or you're going to do any type of stitch line, make sure that you're only doing it around this area right here. All the way around through here is where we're going to sew that liner in. But then up here on the toe, when we go to put this putter cover together, it's kind of going to bend together like that. And there's going to be some edges that are folded over, and there's not going to be any stitches on those edges. So you don't want to groove a stitch line all the way across here and have it showing on those edges where no stitches will be. So I just like to find the center right here, and then I'm only going to stitch groove about 2.5 inches of space right here that's going to be on the top of the toe. So that's just something to keep in mind if you do groove a stitch line in yours. Before I continue on with the finishing process, I just want to talk to you guys about top coats for a second. I do have a full-length video that goes really in depth over the finishing process I primarily use, so I won't go too deep off into that. However, this is an item that's going to be used out in the elements. It's going to be exposed to the sun, rain potentially, so that's something that you may want to keep in mind when you start deciding how you want to go about finishing this item, or which top coats that you're going to want to apply to this. Now, I'm just going to share with you my take on it. Some of you may disagree with me, which is totally fine, because at the end of the day, it's personal preference. So being that this could potentially get wet, some of you may opt for a more stronger protective finish, like a Resin for an example. I just said that because I have Resin over here, which is a stronger sealant, a stronger resistant. It's more of like an acrylic finish for leather. And it's going to provide a little bit of water resistance. However, that's not necessarily my go-to top coat. I prefer tan coat, which is not as strong of a sealant. And I'll kind of explain why I prefer that here in a second. Regardless of which top coat you decide to use on this, the longevity of this item is ultimately going to come down to how well the user takes care of it over time. This is a product that could last many, many years. It is made to last. This is full grain, natural vegetable tanned leather. So it's very strong, it's very durable. Think of a saddle for an example. This same type of leather. So it's meant to be used and abused and be able to withstand that. So as it gets used, any top coat you put on it is going to slowly, eventually wear off or fade away. There's not a perfect solution. There is not a perfect product that you can put on this. And so for that reason, I prefer tan coat because it's not as strong of a sealant. Some of those stronger sealants may provide more protection for a little bit longer, and they may work fine for you. But for me, in my eyes, that will slowly start to wear off over time, and as that product ages, those stronger sealants are going to resist natural oils, conditioners, any products that someone may try to put on that product. It's going to try to resist that. Whereas tan coat is still going to provide somewhat of a resistance factor. It's still going to allow those natural oils from your hands, any conditioners or anything like that, to slowly absorb into the leather and keep it healthy over time. So this is the very first putter cover that I ever made. It's pretty rough. It's definitely not the best, but I made it for myself just for fun earlier in this year, and it's been heavily used. I use it gets out at least once a week for the majority of this year. So it's been in the sun, it's been exposed to the elements, it's dang sure been rained on and completely soaking wet. I lost this out on the course for like a week and a half, 2 weeks before I got it back. And so it's been through it. And it's gonna, like I said earlier, it's gonna get those scuffs and scratches, but it's tough leather. It's meant to be able to withstand that. I just use tan coat on this and it's perfectly fine. Again, as that protective finish slowly starts to wear off as it gets used, you want those natural oils and those conditioners or whatever to be able to absorb into the leather, because that is what keeps the leather healthy, somewhat supple and flexible. So that's going to be the main reason why I like to use tan coat, is because over time it is going to easily allow those oils and conditioners to still soak into that leather and keep it healthy long term. And that's just my 2 cents. I'm not going to tell you what you should or shouldn't do. I think you should do what you're most comfortable with, what you get the best results with. So it all comes down to personal preference at the end of the day. Just wanted to throw that out there to help you keep that in mind as you are selecting your finishing process. as we move on to the assembly portion of this project, this is really where you can get creative and let your imagination run. You can go about this however you want, but when we talk about adding a liner to this, I am personally going to add this shearling, this saddle shearling. I always have some of this in my shop. I love the way it looks, and because of the structure of this, it's going to add a little bit of padding to protect that putter as it's in this cover, and it just gives it that traditional Western look. I know not all of you are probably going to like that or go for that look, so you can use whatever you want. This is some fleece that I picked up from Hobby Lobby. I've actually made a few of these and lined them with fleece. A lot of the mass-produced putter covers you're going to find at the store are going to have some type of fleece or wool on the liner, but you can do it however you want. You can even go through and add some neoprene padding in this, or just get creative, like I said. And then as far as the closure goes, you don't necessarily have to add a closure to this, but I like to make sure that this back stays shut when the putter's in it, just to make sure that it is secured in there. So I'm going to show you how I like to do that. Again, you can alter this pattern and add a little leather strip with a snap closure on this. You can sew in some Velcro. Just let your imagination run wild. But I personally like magnets on my putter covers, so I'm going to be using magnets, and I'm not a magnet expert, but I'm just going to show you how I've been doing it. And that putter cover that I showed earlier that I use very often hasn't had any issues yet, so I'm going to keep doing it like that. These are the magnets that I will be using. These are just little disc magnets that I picked up from Buckle Guy. They're actually the sew-in magnets, so they come in a little plastic covering like this for you to sew them in. But I'm not going to sew them in. I'm going to contact cement or glue them in. So I ripped that plastic off. You can get them just like this, but for some reason I got the sew-in magnets. And these are the best magnets that I've found so far for this project. They're the right size. They're not too weak. They're not crazy strong. I have got some magnets from other leathercraft stores and from Amazon to try them out, and they're just not that strong. So as far as strength goes, these are not the best, but they work really well for what I have right now and for what I've found so far. So that's what I'm going to be using. And as far as where to place the magnets, I like them to be about somewhat, not all the way halfway up on this from the bottom, but somewhere in this area, so when they catch, just that little bottom section right there is going to stay shut and that putter is secured when it's in there. So you can put them wherever you want, but I like to come 1.5 inches from the bottom of this putter cover up to the center, and then the edge of this magnet is about 1/2 inch in from the side. And also make sure that you put the magnets on this back side where this V section is. You want them to be in this area when this is all assembled. As you can tell, I got in a little bit of a rush and wasn't paying attention, and I was about to put them in the wrong area. So do not put the magnets in this area. They are going to go in the back. If you use magnets, always make sure that you put them in the back. So we're going to go ahead and glue these in. Again, I'm not a magnet expert, so do it however you want, but I'm actually going to contact cement these magnets into these spots so that when this thing closes, they come together and stay attached. So make sure that when you do put these in, you make sure that the part that's actually going to stick really well, make sure that they are facing each other when this thing's going to be closed. Another thing to keep in mind when you're deciding where you want to place your magnets is we are going to sew or stitch this liner in along the edge of this. So you want to make sure that you bring that magnet far enough in from where your thread will go. That way, if you're hand stitching it or machine stitching it, they won't cause any issues with where your stitch line will be. I'm just going to be using a little bit of barge in these areas, and then on the back side of these magnets, I also like to make sure that I keep my magnets separated because they do have the tendency when they're close to shoot together. Be careful with your glue, don't do that. So I like to keep my magnets separated just so they don't fly all over the place when they got glue on them. So just keep that in mind too. Gluing magnets may seem weird because they're not necessarily going to absorb any of that glue or anything like that, but this is how I've been doing it because I like them to be secured in place. I don't want them to ever just randomly start slipping around or anything like that in between that leather and that liner. And use whatever glue you like. I just have always used Barge all-purpose contact cement, so that's what I'm using today. We'll let that set up, attach those, and then I'll get that liner glued in. Now as we go to sew this up, I have already trimmed this liner up a little bit. I may go back and trim it up some more after I get done sewing it, but just for ease of my sewing machine and not wanting to mess with all that extra fluffiness, I went ahead and trimmed it up some now. And as we're sewing this, remember, this first time we're going to sew, we're only going to stitch around this area right here. We're not going to stitch up here on this toe until we go to fully assemble this. So just this first round, we're going to stitch this liner around this outer perimeter right here and not right here. So don't sew anywhere up here yet. Also, I'm going to be sewing this on my Cobra Class 26. I have a size 22 needle in this with 1/38 thread. So I went ahead and beveled this liner. You probably saw earlier in the video, I edged and slicked and dyed this main body. And I'm gonna go ahead and slick the edge of this shearling liner, but I'm not gonna dye it. I went ahead and dyed that edge just because I don't want that dye to accidentally bleed over onto the actual liner part itself or all of this fur. So I am going to slick it, and I'm not going to sand it or anything, but I do have this glue eraser that I'm going to use and just get any excess glue that may have came out onto the side off, and then I'm going to go ahead and burnish this as well. So this isn't sanding or anything like that, it's just simply getting any glue that could have potentially squeezed out or got built up on this outer edge, just taking that glue off, rubbing it off. So now we can finally talk about these holes that we're about to punch and the purpose that they serve. I'm sure you can already make out why we're going to do them based off of seeing that other putter cover. But these holes are going to be punched for lace and assembling this putter cover together on this bottom side. So because this is vegetable tan leather and it is a lot more sturdy, veg tan leather has a lot more body to it. Most of the putter covers you're going to see are going to be made with a softer material, and they are able to sew those inside out and then flip them so that all of those seams are hidden. But with this leather, it would be extremely challenging to sew it inside out and flip it. So for that reason, we're going to lace it up. You could also just kind of sew it all together right here on the bottom, but that would kind of leave a big ridge. And I feel like adding this lace to it like this it adds a really cool touch, and it's another way that you can really customize these and mix it up, because there are different ways that you can lace it up right here, and there's so many different color options for lace. You can get gold, blue, green, black, and so I just think that's another really cool way that you can customize these putters as well. So instead of trying to sew all of this up on this bottom side, we're just going to punch these holes and get it laced together. So I'm going to punch those holes really quick, and then we'll continue on. And the hole punch that I'm going to be using is just this Crafttool number 4. It's 5/32 of an inch. Just something around that size would be fine. It doesn't have to be exactly this. I don't think it's too crucial of a decision if you decide to lace this up before you sew this toe in, or if you want to sew this toe in first and then lace it up. It honestly might be easier if you lace all of this up and then sew this toe in, but I'm going to go ahead and sew this toe up and save all of this lacing for the very last step. Something that I forgot to do, and I do apologize, is you want to make sure that you skive all of this area down, especially on this main body, but maybe even on the liner if you can, because since we are going to be doubling all of this over right here to sew this toe in, that is going to be fairly bulky, and I have tried to shave and trim some of this down to alleviate that, but it is still fairly bulky. So that's something that I forgot to do. You want this to be as thin as possible, especially because we are going to have a little bit of a bump here in the center where these two pieces connect. You want this to be as thin as possible to make it easier on you for sewing or stitching this up. So do skive all of this area down. And this isn't just too crucial of a pressure point. There's not going to be a lot of tension in this area. It really just needs to be sewn down so all of this will stay shut. So I am going to add a little bit of glue in this area just to make sure that everything stays even and stuck together when I am sewing this up, but you don't have to use a lot of glue. You don't have to get too messy up here. I'm just going to use a little bit just so that it does stay in place. And if I need to, I have a little paper clip here with some leather strips on it that I can put on this while I'm sewing to make sure that everything does stay even. So that's just something to keep in mind. And all I did here again was just find center right here, and when I glue this up and stick it together, I want to make sure that I match everything up even so everything does come out nice and even. And I probably didn't put my maker stamp on here even, but if you put some initials or anything like that on here, always make sure that you find the center when you're lining everything up so it does look even when it is all said and done. All right, we got this toe all stitched up. My class 26 handled that pretty well. I know folding that over and sewing that right there can get kind of sketchy, so just take your time on it. My 26 handled it well, but I can see how you could maybe have some trouble right there. I know on the back side this little bump isn't ideal, so if any of you guys have any better solutions or any ideas to improve this right here, then drop them in the comments and let everybody know. I'd love to hear as well. But now that we got this toe stitched up, all we have to do is lace this thing up and it will be all finished. As I said earlier on in the video, when you get to this lacing part, this is another cool area on this project where you can really customize it, mix it up to add a cool look. I don't know a ton of lacing techniques, but I know there are a ton of lacing techniques out there that you can mix up the bottom side of this. For this video and time purposes, I'm just going to be doing this little simple X cross stitch pattern. It's really simple, but here are some options that I just wanted to show you that I have for lace. There's so many different types of materials, sizes, colors that you can get, and so for this video, I'm probably just going to go with the traditional white looking color because it does stand out and I think it adds a really nice touch to this. And I am just going to be using 1/8 of an inch wide kangaroo lace in this white color. And I usually get my kangaroo lace from Springfield Leather Company. I know there's a few other places you can find it, but I do prefer the kangaroo lace over the other options out there because it does have a lot more tensile strength, so it's going to have a lower probability of snapping on you. It's a lot tougher, and in my opinion, it will last a lot longer. So that's what I'm going to be using on this project. I'm going to be using about 3.5 feet of lace or 42 inches of lace on this. You always want to have more lace than you need for a project. You always want to have a little bit extra. So if we do have a little bit extra when we get finished, we will snip that off. But I am going to make sure that I do have enough. So I think 3.5 feet will be plenty. So there, and then cut that off about right there. So the amount or length of lace that you need is obviously going to depend on the lacing technique that you decide to use. 3.5 feet is not going to work for every lacing technique, but for this little shoelace, X, cross stitch, whatever you want to call it pattern, 3.5 feet should be plenty. This is not hard at all, but it can be a little bit awkward in some places, so I might not get the best angles, but I am going to do my best to show you. To start off, you just want to start at the top like this with your lace through both of these holes, and just make sure that you have around the same amount of length on each side. And then from here, it's going to be really simple. I like to make sure that I keep one side of the X on the bottom the entire way down, and then make sure that I keep one side as the top part of the X on the entire way down, if that makes sense. But really, you're just going to take one side like this, make a cross, go in this hole, go around the back, come out the hole that's directly beside that, and then make that X again. And we're just going to do that all the way down. And it can be a little bit awkward in these earlier steps right here, these first few holes, but once you get down here towards the bottom, it's really simple and it goes by really fast. But I like to make sure that I just do one side first and get a little run of it and then catch up with this other side until I get down to this easier area. So here's my first run with this left side. You can kind of see the direction that I have going. And now I'm just going to take this side, make that X, go in this hole. And then I want to make sure that I'm going in the back and coming out this hole and then going back down to this hole and just continuing to make that X. And you don't have to worry about pulling these super tight right now. Just make sure you have enough lace to work with, because when we get to the end, we can start cinching it up really tight. I obviously don't use a lacing needle either. I usually just cut a point on my lace regardless of if I'm buck stitching or doing something like this. If you're doing like a triple loop lace or something where you're like braiding and it's really intricate, then I will use a needle in those instances. But for something like this, I just like to cut a tip on the lace. But if you did have a lacing needle, you could probably put a little bend in it and it would make it a little bit easier in these earlier parts. But it's pretty easy once you get to this area because it just goes in one side and fairly simple out the other. And then the same with this side. And when it comes to ending this, you can do it however you want. As you can see, we have a little bit left over right here to work with. If you wanted to, you could even cut off more lace and do it like how I'm about to show you. You can tie it, cut it off, snip it, whatever you want. But this is how I've been doing it. I like to just take this side, bring it around like you were going to make that X again, but we're gonna go back in this hole over here. Back in this hole, and then just pull it down right here and just let that sit in there. Whoa, get over here, camera. One of these days I'll get it, folks. And then just pull it through. And I like to just leave a little tail. I'm gonna do the same with this side, and you can snip this up in here so it's hidden. You can tie it, whatever you want. I'm just going to, on mine, I just have this little tail hanging out. I like it like that. That's just kind of up to you or the customer, whatever you want to do with it. And here she is. Now, I'm sure some people won't like these little tails. They might think it looks silly. I think it looks pretty cool, so I'm just going to leave this one like that, but just do it however you or the customer wants to. But yeah, magnet snap's good. Just imagine some really cool initials right here. This would be a really, really sweet putter cover. And I think this lacing just adds a really, really cool look to it. I mean, it almost looks like a little shoe. That's what my buddies say mine looks like anyways. But I think it's pretty cool. So now we can do a little fit test with an actual putter to see how well everything fits. Now, another thing to keep in mind, because this is vegetable tanned leather, this type of leather is a lot more stiff and rigid. It has a lot more body or structure to it. So something like this is going to have a bit of a break-in period. So the club may not necessarily feel like it fits in there perfect right now. The magnets may or may not just be flying shut. But over time, with the club sitting in this, because of the properties of this leather, it will naturally start to form and almost mold around this club. And this club will start to almost develop a pocket or a slot in there like it wants to find. And so let me show you mine really quick for an example. So keep in mind, I've been using this one for a while, but if you see right here, you can kind of see the channel where mine wants to sit now. We can open it up And you can see it almost has a spot, so when I go to put this on there now, it will almost just go to that little slot every single time and snap in place. And then you can give it a good shake and twist and it doesn't fly off. So if your club or the customer's club feels like it doesn't sit in there really good right now, just give it time, because as that leather breaks in and molds to that club, it should work just fine. And that's going to be a wrap on this one, you guys. I really appreciate you taking the time to watch, and I hope you enjoyed that. I will link all of the patterns and tools and everything in this video in the description, so just if you are interested in using this template or anything like that, all of that will be down there. And like I said many times throughout this video, if you have any ideas or techniques or anything like that that could improve this or improve anything that I mentioned, then go ahead and drop that in the comments. I know I would appreciate it, and I'm sure everybody else would appreciate it as well. And so on that same note, if you do decide to start trying to make these, don't feel restricted to everything that I did in this video. This is just how I am currently making them at this point in time. I'm always trying to learn and grow, and I think you should be doing the same. So implement your own ideas, your own techniques, mix it up a little bit. If you decide to use my template, my patterns, change the patterns up, just be creative with it. This is not the end-all be-all way of doing things. This is just, I wanted to make this video to share this with you and show you how I'm currently doing it. So just keep all of that in mind as well. And if you do decide to start making these, I think they're a really cool item to potentially add to your product line, because golf is a big industry. There's a lot of golfers out there, and they're always trying to look for something cool to add to the bag. And even if you don't necessarily want to sell these, they're really cool to just make for yourself, kind of like I did. They would make a great gift item for friends or family, especially with Christmas being right around the corner. These would be a really cool idea to surprise somebody with. So just keep all of that in mind. Even if a golfer doesn't necessarily want to put this in the bag, I could still see someone wanting to own this just because of its uniqueness. It's handmade, it's made with quality materials, it's made to last, it stands out. So someone might just want to have one as a collector's item to throw on the wall or something. You never know. Just keep all of that in mind. But thank you guys again for watching. Please leave a thumbs up on the video if you liked it. Consider subscribing to the channel if you want to see more of my content. But until next time, we'll see you.